let me share with you some sort of breaking news. You remember in this church and from our church, we had shown you that in the policy document called Project 2025, I shall remind you by virtue of slide, this display here, we showed you that the coalition of think tanks that put together this document, Presidential Transition Project, which is also called Project 2025, one of the policy proposals they made for a new conservative administration was that of a federal Sunday communal rest. Yes, it was recommended by the author of the labor section of that document, Mr. Johnathan Berry, he's a lawyer, that the federal government, that Congress should amend the FLSA, the Fair Labor Standards Act of 1938, to require that employees or workers be paid overtime for any work that employers cause them to do on Sunday, which was being called the default Sabbath. We saw that it was a proposal to regulate work on Sunday by incentivizing communal Sunday Sabbath rest, by de-incentivizing work on Sunday. So if you want to make people work on Sunday, they were saying, you'd have to pay them overtime. And we heard Mr. Berry himself express that the reason for this was that persons could have space to worship and honor God and for communal rest for families and communities. We had been watching this space and we noticed in recent times, in a few days ago, and by the way, let me just say, we told you that this proposal was not the Sunday law. It was a policy proposal for a Sunday law of a nature where they would come through labor policy to say, let Sunday be a day of rest for all by discouraging workers or discouraging employers from opening work on a Sunday. Essentially, that is how they were seeking to go about it. And we showed you that this was a proposal, the first of its kind in this sense, being made to a conservative administration, the Trump kind of administration, to push back as a part of their pushback against the left or the socialists, the communists. Mr. Trump, as you know, came to office last November when he was elected, his party, and he was elected. And then in January, he was inaugurated. And since then, we had been looking out to see what would happen, if anything, where this is concerned. So I want to come out of this now and show you a recent story on the screen, because what has happened is that Mr. Johnathan Berry has been nominated by Trump, along with another lawyer, to be a part of the Labor Department, the same department and the same section for which he wrote for Project 2025, that same Labor Department that contained a proposal for a Sunday law. So here is what I'm showing you on my screen. It says here, Trump pick for chief legal officer. Trump's pick for chief legal officer may signal more changes for DOL, which stands for Department of Labor. So this happened just recently. The White House announced it. You know how he had been making his nominations and they would have to go before the Senate and be vetted before they are confirmed and so on. So in recent times, the President of the United States of America made some more recent nominations, and this was one of them. That is that Mr. Johnathan Berry has been nominated to be solicitor in the Department of Labor. He's not the secretary. There's another person who was already nominated and confirmed as secretary, but he is nominated. So let me read the story for you. It says here, this week, President Donald Trump nominated attorney Johnathan Berry to be the next solicitor of the Department of Labor, DOL. Berry worked in the department during the first Trump administration, and he was the sole author of Chapter 18 of Project 2025's Treaties Mandate for Leadership, which contained a set of policy recommendations for the Department of Labor and related agencies, such as EEOC, NLRB, etc. With his nomination, we thought it would be helpful to review Berry's recommended policy changes for the DOL. What does Chapter 18 say? So I'm not going to read the entire thing, but I'm letting you know that persons are looking at it and they're looking to see how much of his recommendations Trump may or may not apply if he is selected by the Senate. So, for example, when you go down the list of recommendations that he made in Project 2025, you see the very first one is what we are mostly concerned with here, overtime changes. Recommendation 1, overtime changes. And it says here in the story, several proposals are focused on using the Department of Labor to collect more data on the, quote, state of the American family. Mandate, page 588, and to refocus regulations to have an impact on family lives. Examples include allowing non-exempt workers to elect to receive paid time off instead of overtime, incentivizing on-site childcare, forcing employers to pay overtime rates for employees that have to work on Sunday or Saturday, depending on the particular religion, limiting overtime to employees who work remotely unless they work over 10 hours in a specific day, and removing home offices from OSHA regulations. Again, this the author of this story is just listing for you the kinds of policies that were proposed by this gentleman, Johnathan Berry, in the Project 2025 document under the labor section. And so as you can see, just as we showed you, the person recognizes that one of the things he had recommended was that employers should pay overtime rates for employees that have to work on Sunday, or, as the provision had said, or Saturday, depending on the particular religion. And then at the end of the article, the author says, wait and see. The Trump administration acted with lightning speed during the first 3 months of 2025 to implement many of the specific DEI recommendations in Chapter 18 of Project 2025's treaties. Now that Berry has been appointed the Chief Legal Officer for the Department of Labor, it will be interesting to see how many of these other initiatives are implemented in the months and years to come. Okay, so this happened just recently, a few days ago. The man who wrote the section proposing to a conservative type administration like Donald Trump's administration a Sunday law by saying Sunday is the default Sabbath and that people should work. If people have to work overtime, employers should be made to pay them, hoping that the overtime rule would cause the employers to say, well, I don't want to pay out any more money. We don't want to pay out any money, so we rather give them Sunday off. And as is the case for Sabbath keepers, 7-day Sabbath keepers, give them the 7-day Sabbath off. The man who wrote this section and proposed it has just been nominated by Donald Trump to be the solicitor or chief legal officer in the Department of Labor. Now, I'm letting you know this because I don't want it to come as a surprise to you if you didn't know before. But I'm also letting you know and reminding you, based on what our studies have shown us, that this act on the part of Donald Trump and whatever may come of Berry's confirmation, because he has to go through the vetting, whatever may come of his confirmation as solicitor of the DOL, I'm reminding you, my dear people, reminding you, my dear brethren, that that is not the pattern of how the Sunday law will come. So when you hear Isaac Olatunji, that pastor of State Line, Hazael, because he's a Hazael according to Sister White, when you hear him, when you hear Henriquez and others trumping up this news and telling you, oh, Sunday law is coming, because Johnathan Berry has been nominated by Donald Trump to be the solicitor in the Department of Labor, and he is the one that wrote this section concerning the Sunday law, please remember what we have learned about how the Sunday law comes. It comes according to Revelation chapter 19 and verse 20, and Revelation chapter 13, verses 13 through to 17. It comes when the false prophet or apostate Protestants in America will do spiritualism's miracles or miracles from Satan, including the miracle of calling fire down from heaven in the sight of men upon the earth to deceive the Congress of the United States of America to change the U.S. Constitution in some way, particularly adjusting the First Amendment to set up the image of the beast. And then that image of the beast will enforce the mark of the beast. It's not prophesied to come from one man. It's not prophesied to come from the agitation of one man for a labor law amendment. That is not what the Bible teaches. So when you hear Hazael saying things like, oh, Donald Trump just nominated Mr. Sunday Law himself, that is rubbish. That is not true prophecy. That is just another level of deception. I could have come here tonight and given you a whole study on that. But I decided I wanted to look at what recently happened today and yesterday at the General Conference Annual Council meeting or Spring Council meeting, because it's all leading up to the General Conference session in July of this year, 2025. But where opportunity presents itself, I will say something more about this issue, but I just wanted to let you know. Remember the pattern of how the Sunday law comes. It doesn't come by one man making a proposal for the amendment of a federal law about labor and recommending that people who go to church on Sunday get Sundays off, and people who go to church on the 7-day Sabbath get Sunday off, or you pay them overtime if you don't want to give them days off. That's not how the Sunday law comes, okay? So we will be reminded of that, and we will read and interpret the news accordingly. This should not necessarily either come as a surprise to us. It didn't come as a surprise to me because Johnathan Berry served in Trump's administration before. He served in the first administration. He himself said so in the interview, in the video that we had been showing to you. And we recognize by now that in most cases, if not all, Donald Trump has been nominating persons who contributed to the Project 2025 document. He has been nominating them for holding offices in his cabinet, according to the field or area that they contributed to. So this really should not come so much as a surprise to us. But what it may signify is that if this gentleman persists with his call for this provision that he had recommended in policy, we may just hear more talk about an agitation for a Sunday law. But we will keep our eyes on the faith office, the White House faith office, as that body of apostate Protestants, as that body that represents the leading churches in America, who are likely to be the ones to call for miracles, to call for the setting up of such a body as an aid to Congress, to advise them to enforce religious laws, including the Sunday law. Amen.